A troubling anniversary. U.S. resolution fails at the UN. The world watched with bated breath as the United Nations General Assembly convened on February 24, 2025. It was a day etched in history, marking the third anniversary of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. Tensions were high, the specter of war looming large. The United States, a global superpower, had tabled a resolution calling for an end to the conflict. However, in a stunning turn of events, the resolution was rejected, sending shockwaves through the international community. The vote was a stark reminder of the deep divisions that the Ukraine war had exposed, raising serious questions about the future of global diplomacy. The rejection of the U.S. resolution was a significant diplomatic setback for the Trump administration. It highlighted the limitations of American power on the world stage and exposed the fraying consensus on the international response to the conflict. The vote also underscored the growing influence of countries who chose to abstain, unwilling to take a firm stance on the issue. This neutrality, while seemingly neutral, spoke volumes about the shifting geopolitical landscape. The U.S. resolution, while calling for peace, had been met with criticism for its failure to explicitly condemn Russia's aggression. This omission, a glaring one in the eyes of many, was seen as a concession to Russia, an attempt to appease an aggressor. The resolution, in its attempt to be neutral, ended up alienating many nations who saw it as a betrayal of the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. The vote was a clear signal that the world was not ready to overlook Russia's actions, no matter how powerful the nation proposing such an oversight. The anniversary of the invasion only served to amplify the gravity of the situation. The world was reminded of the human cost of the conflict, the countless lives lost, and the millions displaced. The vote, taking place against this backdrop of suffering, highlighted the urgency of finding a peaceful resolution. However, the rejection of the U.S. resolution served as a stark reminder of the long road ahead, the deep divisions that needed to be bridged, and the difficult choices that lay ahead for the international community. The U.S. resolution, while calling for an end to the conflict, had notably omitted any mention of Russian aggression. This omission was a key point of contention, drawing sharp criticism from Ukraine and its allies. They argued that a resolution that failed to name the aggressor lacked the moral authority to bring about a just and lasting peace. The omission was seen as a dangerous precedent, one that could embolden aggressors and undermine the rules-based international order. In contrast, a separate resolution put forward by Ukraine and backed by European nations directly called for Russia's immediate withdrawal from Ukrainian territory. This resolution, firmly rooted in international law and principles of sovereignty, garnered significant support, passing with a clear majority. The Ukrainian resolution, unlike its U.S. counterpart, was unambiguous in its condemnation of the invasion, its language reflecting the realities on the ground. The U.S. argued that its resolution, while not explicitly mentioning Russia, was intended to be more inclusive, aiming to bring all parties to the negotiating table. They believed that by avoiding blame, they could create a more conducive environment for dialogue and diplomacy. However, this approach was seen by many as naive at best and dangerous at worst, failing to hold the aggressor accountable for their actions. The stark contrast between the two resolutions underscored the fundamental differences in approach to resolving the conflict. The U.S., in its pursuit of a swift resolution, opted for a more conciliatory tone, hoping to bring Russia on board. Ukraine, on the other hand, steadfastly refused to compromise on its sovereignty and territorial integrity, demanding a resolution that acknowledged the reality of the invasion and held Russia accountable for its actions. This difference in approach, while highlighting the complexity of the situation, also underlined the importance of international law and the need for a united front against aggression. The war in Ukraine had placed a significant strain on the relationship between the United States and Ukraine. While the U.S. had provided substantial military and financial aid to Ukraine, there were growing concerns in Kiev about the Trump administration's commitment to Ukrainian sovereignty. Trump's past statements praising Russian President Vladimir Putin, coupled with his administration's attempts to downplay Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. elections, had sown seeds of doubt in the minds of many Ukrainians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in his address to the UN General Assembly, delivered a powerful and impassioned plea for international support. He condemned Russia's aggression in no uncertain terms and called for a united global response to hold Moscow accountable for its actions. Zelensky, a former comedian thrust into the role of a wartime leader, had become a symbol of Ukrainian resilience, his defiance in the face of aggression resonating across the globe. President Trump, however, remained a polarizing figure on the world stage. His decision to initiate separate negotiations with Russia, excluding Ukraine and European allies from the initial talks, was met with widespread condemnation. Critics accused him of undermining international efforts to resolve the conflict and of prioritizing his own political interests over the security of a democratic ally. The U.S. argued that their approach was aimed at securing a quicker end to the conflict, believing that direct talks with Russia were crucial for achieving a breakthrough. However, this move was seen by many as a betrayal of trust, a sign that the U.S. was willing to negotiate with an aggressor at the expense of the victim. The UN vote on the Ukraine war resolutions exposed the shifting sands of global power dynamics. The decline in support for resolutions condemning Russia compared to previous years highlighted the growing reluctance of many nations to take sides in a conflict that they saw as increasingly intractable. This shift was driven by a complex web of factors, including economic interests, geopolitical considerations, and a growing sense of fatigue with the conflict. The rise of China as a global power was also impossible to ignore. China's decision to abstain from the vote, despite its close ties with Russia, was a clear indication of its desire to chart its own course in international affairs. China's growing influence, coupled with the increasingly assertive stance of other regional powers, signaled a move away from the unipolar world order that had defined the post-Cold War era. The vote also highlighted the limitations of traditional diplomacy in an increasingly multipolar world. The ability of the U.S. to rally international support, once a given, was no longer a foregone conclusion. The rise of nationalism, populism, and authoritarianism globally had eroded the norms and values that had underpinned the post-World War II order, making it increasingly difficult to forge a united front on issues of global concern. The UN vote was not just about Ukraine, it was about the future of the rules-based international order. It was a stark reminder that the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the peaceful resolution of disputes could no longer be taken for granted. The vote served as a wake-up call for the international community, a reminder of the need to defend these principles in the face of growing challenges. The road ahead would be fraught with difficulties, but the stakes were too high to allow the world to slip into chaos and conflict.